So as a NASCAR fan, I finally started to get into the wonderful world of NASCAR podcasting. As listening to podcasts isn't just a good cope, especially when you're working hard for $15 an hour. Listening to podcasts can actually make you motivated to be the cog in the machine and work for sub-minimum wage. Because there's just a lot to be excited about, especially in this golden era of podcasting. NASCAR is no exception, as you have the big three right now. I'm not talking about Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., and Kevin Harvick. I'm talking about the Dale Jr. Download, Actions Detrimental, and the Teardown. All of these shows do a great job sharing interesting information, having in-depth conversations, and having intriguing personalities that make you want to listen every single week. So the bar was set astronomically high before Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour podcast first hit the airwaves of Spotify. And unfortunately, it was a podcast that I was dreading and I was just avoiding for the longest time. It's not like I was worried my ears were gonna bleed, like when I listened to These Are the Days of Girlhood by Dylan Mulvaney. I have to put this out there, but this is me not endorsing transphobia. Dylan Mulvaney just can't sing or dance. The podcast just did not come off as serious or informative at all. But I caved. I eventually hit a point in my shift where I needed a new podcast and I decided, let's do this. Let's get this over with. So after listening to the Richmond edition, I have to say that Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour podcast was a kerfluffle to listen to. Not in the sense that it wasn't easy on the ears. They could have easily gotten someone like a Dave Moody and gave off the aura that this was filmed at the front counter of a gas station. But a podcast led by Caitlin Vincey is just not cooking. My main problem with Caitlin Vincey is that she's more of a studio host. Her experience is in broadcasting through the NASCAR race day style shows, which in that format she actually does a decent job. Her style is more direct, however that does not work in a podcasting format and it shows. Caitlin Vincey in this podcast is like a Goodyear tire at Bristol. The topics get worn out pretty quick because she doesn't build on the conversation like Jared Allen on Actions Detrimental or Casey Boat on Door Bumper Clear. Then again, this podcast does not have a strong personality to build around Kevin Harvick. Dylan Mamba Smith is mostly here as an attempt to make Kevin Harvick culturally relevant. He even has an iconic segment that's called Mamba's Social Sips. Yeah, this was the point in the podcast where I hoped that a bird would steal one of my AirPods and then fly up into a tree. If I'm being honest, I think this podcast actually fits Kevin Harvick's style. He made his NASCAR Cup Series career by carrying RCR and Stuart Haas on his back. Now he gets to carry a subpar podcasting team to relevance by sharing his experiences as a driver who raced the next generation car. Now look, Kevin Harvick is a great asset to this podcast. He is the shining star and rightfully so. Except for the fact that he somehow thinks the Jeff Gordon and Brad Keselowski fight was in 2015. Really, Kevin? Now look, I haven't gotten to old age yet where you forget things, but this was a Mike Joy moment for Kevin Harvick. And you know what? This is more of an argument that the team around Kevin Harvick is bad because Caitlin Vincey had the date written down. Yet she didn't stand firm and say it was 2014, and instead we have this awkward 2-minute thing where Kevin Harvick's talking about how this was Jeff Gordon's final year, it was disappointing, Mamba Smith doubling down and saying, yeah, it was 2015, it definitely was 2015. One of the most frustrating things when listening to a podcast or watching a YouTube video is when you just hear this inaccurate information from the quote-unquote experts. It's not a good look. And that was one moment that was unacceptable, but for the most part, Kevin Harvick still does a decent job. Unfortunately, I have to point this out, as Americans, we're dealing with a lot of inflations right now. That's jobflation and that's inflation, but podcasters have another inflation to deal with, and that's infoflation. Kevin Harvick brings a lot of information to the table as someone that formerly drove the next generation car, but so does Denny Hamlin, and he does it in a much more captivating way than Harvick. So I am going to make believe and pretend that I'm the producer for Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour podcast. The Monday showing would be the traditional race breakdown where Kevin Harvick recaps the race, but instead it's going to be with people that Kevin Harvick actually wants to work with. It could be someone at KHI, or maybe even Tim Fedowa, just throwing out some names there. Then honestly, I wouldn't touch the Wednesday one-on-one interview. I think that works well. Kevin Harvick does a great job in this role. I actually learned a lot from his Ray Evernham interview, and I like that he interviews people like Denny Hamlin, Shane Van Gisbergen, and even Joe Girardi. I think you can keep that untouched. Then there would be a third show on Thursday, and this is where Kevin Harvick really goes into depth on the stories and a lot of the challenges he faced in his career as a driver. There are so many people that you can have on this show and get into in-depth discussions, and I'm going to just name a couple of those and some of the storylines that can come out of them. Richard Childress, as I'd like to hear more about how Kevin Harvick stepped into the shoes of Dale Earnhardt. I think you can also talk about the struggles of expansion for RCR and maybe some of the reasons why Kevin Harvick didn't reach his full potential at RCR. Tony Stewart, as you can talk about some of the things at Stewart-Haas Racing and then some of the other wackier things that happened in their relationship. Rodney Childers, as I would like to hear about how the number 4 team was built, how they rose to the occasion and won the 2014 championship, as well as their struggles in 2021 to 2023, because there were a lot of things like the wheel well templates and other things at Stewart-Haas Racing that held them down. I would like to hear more about that. Clint Bowyer, as I know a lot of people are going to cringe, are you kidding me? We have plenty of time where Harvick and Bowyer are going back and forth in the Fox booth. But I'm going to be honest, there are so many things in the Harvick-Bowyer dynamic that you can't touch on in the booth besides, aha, I beat you in this one race. If you put them in a podcast setting, you're not only going to get a lot of banter, but also you can hear a lot about how they were teammates, like how they understood each other, whether it was racing for Richard Childress or Stewart-Haas. Honestly, I think Fox Sports is underplaying this dynamic, which might be the other solution to fixing this podcast. Fox Sports is in the live sports broadcasting business. Podcasting is not in their wheelhouse like it is for Dirty Mo Media. Not to mention, this is a traditional media conglomerate, and the main objective, I believe, for Fox and NBC is to make a profit. That is probably why they got Caitlin Vincey, as they don't want to have to hire someone that Kevin Harvick handpicked, because then they'd have to give them a salary, and that would make things complicated in the final budget. What I'm trying to say is, at Fox Sports, there's a strong adherence to the budget, and this podcast probably isn't getting a lot of money pushed into it. Which I think another thing this podcast misses out on is talking more about the Fox production and what goes into it. Because right now, a lot of fans do not like Fox's NASCAR coverage. And unfortunately, the only thing I've seen is deflection from criticism, because at Martinsville, they were talking about how they missed so many storylines, and as expected, Caitlin Vincey kind of took the Dave Moody approach where, like, you don't understand what goes on in the broadcast, which to a lot of fans comes off as tone deaf. As we all understand, it's hard to broadcast a NASCAR race. However, in recent years, Fox has cut corners, whether it's getting rid of on-air talent or getting rid of cameras, and it shows in the quality. So to wrap this all up, Kevin Harvick has achieved a lot in racing. This guy has tons of experience in driving different generations of cars and being in the business side of motorsports. The material is there for a great podcast. In its current state, however, Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour podcast is a missed opportunity and a great waste of so much potential. If you enjoyed this video, hear why maybe Dirty Mo Media owner Dale Earnhardt Jr. might be a great television play-by-play guy. Other than that, this is Nathan for Digital Guest House. Life's a beach, and then you drive.